Hi, I'm Pattie Martins, and this is my personal sexual abuse story. Until the age of 9, I grew up in rural Portugal. I was in a small town, sort of in the thick of it there. But honestly, as a kid, it was just so much fun. I was running through the woods, I was making mud cakes. I was a bit of a tomboy. We lived with my grandparents. They were lovely and loving. My parents were more tense. They were very young when they had me. Then what happened when I turned 9 and we moved to the UK? Firstly, I didn't speak English and we were quite poor and things were a bit scary. And like my parents, they didn't really socialize very much. So I was always really sort of bullied and definitely an outsider. I mean, I was clearly different to these people, right? I was loud, Latin, sort of countryside rebellious. I had broken English. Yeah, I had a hard time. I was bullied a lot. When I started developing, I also lost a lot of weight because I was obese, morbidly obese, and I'd lost 50 kilos. That's like 100 pounds. That was a big turning point for me and my self-esteem. But it was around that time that my father started looking at me differently. He had started giving me sort of he started giving me more attention, which is strange for me because I never had their attention unless I broke something, unless I was in trouble, because it was that type of sort of strict Catholic upbringing. He wanted to know if I had had my first kiss yet. He wanted to know if I had tried smoking yet. He'd kind of suggest that he massage like my shoulders, my legs, which was completely out of the blue. We didn't have that type of touchy-feely relationship. I mean, I'm still a virgin. I barely know what sex is. And so okay, yeah, I'm supposed to trust that. So then he would then, sometimes just hug me out of the blue and then his hand would slip and he'd touch me in a private area. I'd be like, oh, sorry. I never really spoke to him. He didn't help me with homework or anything. It was almost like the quintessential uptight Catholic sort of way of life. At that time, it was the scariest thing that I was experiencing because it was alienating that my dad was touching me in a way that felt too intimate, sexual, were these moments that were kind of sneaked into the sort of day-to-day mundane lifestyle in the corridor, in the kitchen. I could be doing washing up, he'd sneak up from behind and help me. And it all just sounded innocent, but it felt like I wanted to scream and I couldn't. At that point, I didn't really have anyone to ask, and it just kind of kept happening. And it got to the point where I could hear him going to the bathroom in the middle of the night. I could feel that maybe there was something going on the other side of the wall, like he was hesitant on whether or not coming in. And so that's like when I stopped sleeping because I just felt as though at any point he could come in. This behavior with my dad lasted 3 years, sort of, I hope he won't come into my room tonight years where I would be afraid if he knocked on the door when I was having a shower, because he sometimes would just open it, like if there was a day that I forgot to lock it, he'd just like walk in and just look at my body and take a little bit too long, you know what I mean? Like I knew it wasn't an accident, but nothing could be proved. I don't know what he did. I just know that I feel very violated. Things started to change for me when my grandmother visited. I think it was actually a moment where she saw him with me in the kitchen, him trying to help me do the dishes and holding me from behind in a way that seemed too close. I saw that she looked and that there was a moment between them two and me. And I felt embarrassed, as though I was guilty of something. Later that night, my grandma sat on my bed and she asked me, if I was okay, and I immediately burst into tears. She suddenly explains to me that I do have a right to feel the way I feel. I ask her, can you tell Mum? Because my mother is kind of someone who's a bit difficult to talk to. She's scary. She's a scary person for me to talk to. And my grandma immediately told me that she was going to try, but that she didn't expect that it would go well. That night, something changed permanently, because now I knew that what I was enduring was in fact something that was not right. The way that my dad looked, touched, and spoke to me was inherently sexual. Sometime during that same period, my grandma came back to me and said that my mum did not take their talk well. My mum accused my grandma of trying to create trouble in our family, trying to split them up. Not long after that, my grandparents returned to Portugal. I remember seeing them drive away from my bedroom window, and it was even scarier to think that I was going to have to deal with this on my own, and that it was so scary that my grandparents drove away because they didn't know how to deal with it. So my grandma had convinced me to, at some point, when my dad is outside in the evening, go downstairs and ask my mom to talk. There was one day, it was around 10 p.m. I should be in bed. I come down the stairs, I hear her watching TV, and I honestly sat on the steps for like a long time because I didn't know that I was actually going to go through with it. And I stared at her for a bit, and eventually I shakily approached her. Like I said, she was a bit scary. And I told her that I felt like I needed to say something, that I didn't feel comfortable the way Dad was being with me. And it was just, it was the cringiest moment of my life because I didn't know how to speak about sex. I didn't know how to bring it up. I just knew that my grandma had told me it was the only way, and I was desperate and scared. And so she just keeps asking, but has he ever touched you inappropriately? Yes, but not like, and I'm kind of stuttering, and I think my mom was so scared to even imagine that that was a possibility that she just took that and said, if there's doubts, then it's not real and don't even go there. And then she proceeded to tell me that I was wrong to have even entertained Grandma's idea that maybe there was something wrong with my dad. She yelled at me and pointed to the garden and told me to go outside right now and apologize to your dad. You go outside right now and apologize to your dad for having thought that he was a pervert. I went outside, I looked for him, and he was there like working on a car engine. And I said, like, I was pale and I was crying and shaking a bit, so he stopped, and I said, Mom told me to come out here to tell you that I'm sorry for thinking that you could be touching me inappropriately because I'm not comfortable. And I'm just like crying, and I'm sick, I'm physically sick. And he just turned blue, he just told me to go to my room. But I could tell that something had exploded that day. Problem also with the way that this was dealt with was that then it kept happening because I'd complained, so now it could continue happening even more sort of blatantly. Because who else am I going to complain to? My dad continued, I would call it stalking at that point. My mother later confessed to me that there was one night she slept in front of my bedroom door because she had caught him there in the middle of the night just staring at me sleep. At the time, I just kept being told that nothing was going on. They kept telling me that I was making a big deal out of nothing because I just needed the attention and talking about things that made everyone uncomfortable. And why did I insist on doing that? There was one morning, I turned 16. We had moved back to Portugal. So once again, now I don't speak Portuguese, and once again, very alienated. And in the Portuguese tradition, when your daughter turns 15 or 16, you give her like an heirloom, like the first heirloom, and it's usually given to her by her dad, normally at a party or something, like a birthday party. In my case, he walked in and he was watching me sleep in the morning, and my breasts were uncovered, and I quickly pulled my pajama down, and he was there holding this ring box with a ring in it, and it looked like he was proposing. I spent most of my formative years crying, either in my bedroom or in a bathroom. In my case, I was never fully physically raped. Just everything else that comes with sexual abuse, the mental games, the inappropriate touching, the flirting. Eventually, he divorced my mum, but even after that, I was the one to blame for the divorce. I was convinced it had all been my fault because I was just such a irresistible seductress, and I couldn't help but be. I don't even know what the words would be. So when my mother told me that there was a moment that she was so scared that she slept in front of my bedroom. When she said that, and I'm in my 20s, and I spent years saying that that's what was going on, and they were telling me that I was making it all up, I knew everyone around me knew. I knew that I knew, and I knew that my dad knew. But because we didn't speak about it, it didn't exist. The moment when, I'm not crazy, when that moment happened, that when I went to university, my father called me after having divorced my mum. I'm in my dorm room, and I get a call from France, which is strange. Pick it up, and it's my father on the other line. I'm like, what, 18, 19? I'm sitting like in my dorm room bed across from from the person I shared the dorm room with. She's staring at me going, is everything okay? And I remember pretending like, yeah. He was drunk, and he was telling me all the things that he wanted to have said to me out loud that he hadn't. He said, I'm in a bar. And you remember me, right? And I'm like, you shouldn't have my number. I told you I didn't want you. They shouldn't have given you my number. He said, I've always wanted. And then he just proceeded to say all the things he wanted to do with me sexually, and candidly talking about touching my lips and licking, and I'm like 19, and I can't believe he's actually saying it. I hung up and I threw the phone on the floor like I wanted to get rid of it because it was too much for a brain to deal with. But it set me free. Because it wasn't me. And I think to this day, it's really something that I could really appreciate, that if you let someone mess with your head, then that I was my own worst enemy. I thought I was an awful person. I really did. I have thought I didn't deserve to live. Right after that phone call, I kind of automatically just went up the fire escape to the roof, and I just gave myself a few seconds because I thought maybe now I'll jump. Because it's just too dark. It's too dark for me. To hear his voice like in my ear, it was too dark. And I almost jumped. But I knew I didn't want to die, and I felt like a guiding spirit or an ancestor. Someone told me to take a breath, think about it, just think about it. And I did, and I stayed up there. And then a friend of mine, who was quite wise beyond her years, though she was older, she just offered me cigarettes when I started smoking. And I smoked that cigarette, and I was ready to sort of start talking about it. My family still denied that he was that crude over the phone, surely. But I had no doubts left. And of course that put into question, how do I feel about my family? How do I really feel about them now? Years go by, I haven't spoken to my dad since that moment. But my family keeps insisting that when he visits, that I wait for him and that we have lunch together. One time he's visiting from France, wherever he's living, and I'm leaving the driveway, and he's in the car on the other side coming up the driveway. We're both essentially in the car. And I'm looking at him on the other side, and he looks so small. Just this man, he's small, he looks kind of depressed. And he says hello. And I step out of the car because my grandma and great really pushed me to do it and say hello to him. So I feel like I have to, which isn't fair. And he said, it's so brave that you would just say hello to me. I remember he said that to me. And then he also said something to the effect of, you just need to get over it. I haven't spoken to him since, but I do know for a fact that he still doesn't admit anything happened to himself or the people around him in his new life in another country. Every woman had a different story. Every friend of mine, if there's 4 people at my table, if there's 4 women at my table, 3 of them have been sexually assaulted in different ways. Some of them rape, some of them touch, some of them abused. Eventually I had to understand that it had been abuse with a capital A, and it's not because it wasn't rape, that it wasn't abuse. And that was very clear to me, because he had done things to me and touched me and spoken to me in a way that I didn't want. And he was my dad. Making the video for the internet about my personal story with abuse, I didn't even know the title to give it at the time, you know? Is it sexual abuse? Is it not? I mean, in my mind, it already was, but was I going to get people asking me if I was right about putting it in that way or not? I was worried about what my family would think when they watched it. If they already thought that I was making a storm in a teacup, then now it was going to be intense. But to be fair, the relationship with me just deteriorated. I am going to say it now, and I have found this platform I can use. My voice no longer quivers. I'm not asking for permission to talk. I'm going to say things as they are, because I knew that it would be the only way to get my voice back, to get my voice back into my body, to stop justifying and stop defending its validity and its truth. So many of my friends on Facebook that I couldn't have fathomed, they wrote back to me saying they have a similar story, like a lot. And a lot of them were also saying it wasn't rape, but ... And immediately, to me, it was validated. We basically can only get our power back when we scream at the top of our lungs what the truth is. That's what I did, even though I wasn't screaming in the video. But that's how it felt. And I have never had that recurring dream again, where I'm screaming and I feel like if I'm screaming at the top of my lungs and no one can hear me. I've never had that dream come back.